Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm always sort of incredibly surprised and grateful if I see anybody sort of putting any trust in me. I'm always thinking, God's sake, why? And I'm wearing two hats. This is true. I'm now the third year the dean of the architecture school in Tallinn, and we're running an office. Happily, there are other people who run the office more often than I recently. But I'm talking about projects now. I'm doing the kind of boring stuff. I'm going to show a lot of projects, but very fast. And I think it's one of the important things in projects is that there has to be an ambition, something which you really sort of want to do. I mean, architects in a way is a sort of a control freak. You really want something. And the other thing we think is very, very important is that every project has a different kind of ambition, that they don't fall in the same sort of thing, that you don't do really the same building all over again. And well, I'm gonna start with we were invited a year ago, probably maybe a half, to participate in a competition. No, I mean not a competition. It was an exhibition of, and that was organized by Estonian Architects Union to think about the huge prefabricating housing areas. I think it's a common thing we have all here around the Baltic countries. And well, this is, if we think of how people sort of, with the patterns of dwelling, how people have built their dwellings for a long time, then well, this is, all right, yeah, well, this is the Tallinn Old Town. Well, so the heydays of the 15th century. And this is the first, I would say, the first suburbs. The very first buildings, I think, were in the 30s, but they actually started to grow substantially in the 60s and 70s. And this is Lasnamäe, the biggest prefabricated housing area in Tallinn, and that was built mainly in the 80s, started in the 70s. And well, if we see those things together, and now these are the Tallinn. Well, nobody really knows. It's an estimate that it had something around 4,000 people living there within the city walls. And well, basically, it's we have. If we compare the densities of the areas of 4,000 and 5,000 inhabitants, then the old town, then the sort of new suburbs, and the prefabricated housing areas, these are actually the densest areas in Tallinn. The most of the people living per square kilometer, however you sort of count that. And that has always been a huge sort of question for me, that, I mean, we have the densest population in these areas and the least of urban quality. How does that happen? I mean, the sort of normal guess would be that when we densify, people actually are the ones who generate the urban quality. And why does that happen? Why hasn't it happened? I mean, these are not new things. They've been there for several decades. And well, when we look at one of those, this is around 800 people. And this is a typical Estonian village or a very small town of 800 people. And when we sort of compare this, well, this is the pattern. This is just the pattern of the prefabricated housing areas. This is the pattern of obviously the private dwellings. And this is the pattern of, well, it's Kaina village. It's on one of the islands. It's a very nice place. And I mean, we have exactly, well, more or less exactly the same amount of people living here and here. And the difference is that, I mean, one has, well, it's one of the sort of, one of those small towns which does actually quite well. They have a swimming pool, they have a good supermarket, they have 2 restaurants, there are some jobs there, because it's on the island, it's a bit of a tourist thing. There are a couple of hotels. And nothing of that is happening here. It's just apartments for 800 people. So what we proposed, I mean, if we look at this thing, it's not such a bad design. It has a lot of air. It is very well oriented towards the sun. It closes off the northern winds. Well, in principle, all decisions seem to be quite right, but there's just complete lack of any urbanism. So what we proposed is, on the first sort of 3 floors, you can, first very simple thing, you're allowed to turn your apartments into offices, and even sort of, you should try to do that. So you generate some kind of working places, so people don't have to commute from these areas to somewhere else to work. And then you can add, when you've turned these 3 floors into offices, then you don't specifically need the other side of the building for the natural light, so you can actually generate some bigger areas for services, either a supermarket or a sporting area or something else. So if we do these things, we can generate something which is in the village, in a small town. And obviously these buildings have a very poor building quality. So, I mean, you need another layer of insulation for sure. And sometimes it could be construction problems, but they are not so big because it's prefabricated concrete. It's not, nothing very much is going wrong with that. But, well, you know, on the southern side, we added a layer of balconies or gardens, and on the northern side, just a thick layer of insulation. And then, well, we sort of generated them a new, how would I say, I invented a word for this, a city of small towns. Well, I mean, we can imagine that each one of these becomes a small town. We have this area of different kinds of small towns. And so we've sort of reinvented the habitation in this way. And well, that's the model that went to the exhibition. And we have to produce pictures where everybody's happy and the sun is shining all the time. Another thing is a holiday village we were asked to do in Norway, in Vambrack. And it's a very unique place. It's a completely different kind of setting, climatically, in landscape-wise, and also obviously program-wise. It was very surprising. I mean, well, there's a never-ending surprise for an architect, or at least for me, when people come to me and say that, well, we should somehow arrange the way they're living, or they provide living for other people. I mean, wow, how on earth should we know how to do that? It's a very exceptional spot. The clientele was fairly surprising. I mean, when Norwegians say that this is going to be not for our local simple Norwegians, but for the rich Germans who come with the boats, and the environment shouldn't be anything less than lesser quality or lesser sort of fashionable thing than they have in the boats. And it's really, it's at Sognefjord. It's the longest fjord in Norway. It's around 100 kilometers from Bergen. And it's accessible by car, but not so well, really. I mean, there is a little road. There are tunnels on both ends, and the tunnels are really small, so you can't, I'm not very sure, I'm quite sure actually, you can't bring huge things on trucks. But the Sognefjord is very deep, so you can, and I mean, this hill goes down very steep in the water, so you actually can come with the boats. And the whole thing, you know, and I mean, in the end, it's all obviously pretty often about money. I mean, the business plan was that you hire an Estonian architect, which is a bit cheaper than in Norway, not a bit, but maybe, and then the real business plan was to produce all these houses in Estonian housing factories, and to ship them here, and actually sort of have 90% of the building works done in Estonia and just about 10% on the site, which is a sort of huge saving. So one of the clear things was that we were supposed to work with the modular thing, and another sort of very, well, architecture is all about restrictions often, but they are also quite useful. So a very clear restriction was a building module, and these were three-dimensional modules. So you actually ship a module with a sort of fitted kitchen, and the size of the modules was very, very clear. It was 14.5 by 5.3 by 3.8 meters. All right, and I'm going to through that sort of quite fast. I mean, we had a planning, a zoning plan, so we couldn't change the areas of the buildings and the typologies of the buildings, but we did the buildings. And one of the things was we also sort of provided for the public areas. And it's an incredible site. The difference of height from the road to the sea is 60 meters. And so one of them, and how do you deal with public space in a very steep kind of thing? And so we decided that the one sort of major ambition of creating the public space is actually creating horizontals. Well, this is obviously the most sort of obvious kind of horizontal. You have the deck at the front of, or at the sea. The next one, we called it the sea promenade. Next down, we called it the city promenade, or the town or village promenade. And this sort of unites basically all the buildings which we added. And the last one, we called it the forest promenade, I think. And this just follows one height line in the, and this was a very sort of not very nice forest actually, but you could walk there, and so if you can actually sort of keep the height line and sometimes allow seating or views, or do just very, very minimal things to make it somehow habitable, or not habitable, but walkable. And I'm going to go through the buildings very fast. I mean, these are private residences, and it's really very simple. The one module, second module, a third module, and when the landscape was not so steep, we had two modules. And this is obviously the living and kitchen, and upstairs there's sleeping rooms, or well, in this case downstairs as well. And the main thing is really, you have views to both sides, views to the fjord, and the fjord is actually to the west, so you have the sunset across the fjord, and views to the mountains. The mountains are incredibly sort of impressive there. The apartment buildings, again, yeah, I think the sections are more sort of informative. You, the first sort of 2 floors, you can enter from the deck at the water, and the second, the upstairs 2 floors, you can enter from the road, from the back. A terraced housing. One of the points of this project was that, and I think this was quite sort of strong point, that you had to hide all the cars. We had to provide, I think, 71 housing units and places for around 90 cars, I believe. And you can, I mean, you're actually even supposed to blast into the rock. I mean, this is incredible. You just blast into the rock, and then you hide the cars. So, I mean, you have just fairly little buildings and this huge thing in the rock for the cars. And, well, you obviously don't see them then, and that's quite nice, actually. And that's the sort of the smallest units at the smaller hotel. Which is, well, basically, we had 2 ideas. One of these was buildings that are kind of on the landscape, the private residences and the apartment buildings I showed first. And then there are buildings that are in the landscape, or basically in the hill, if I may say so. And this is the hotel and the sort of terraced housing. And we did that. We tried to really sort of follow the curve of the hill, so it's almost like sort of pixelates the natural curve of the hill. All right, there's a spa and a small restaurant. There were two existing guest houses, so we just followed the shape of them in a negative and made it into a rather big restaurant. Another amazing quality of this site is obviously the Norwegian seafood. Anything, you put something in the water and you get something, a huge crab or something very big immediately. And this is, that doesn't happen in the Baltics. And one of the sort of tiniest thing was the floating sauna. You can, it doesn't have a motor. You have to sort of take it with the boat. And it has really the sort of program, a mixed hybrid of a boat and the sauna. It has an open terrace on one end and the lounge, then there's a shower and a sauna, and then a diving terrace on the other hand, so you sort of jump into wherever, and you can anchor it wherever. And well, unfortunately, I don't understand even why this didn't go forward. This has been put to a stand now, saying that they don't have any money, which well, in Norwegian case would be that, you should look in the other pocket, come on. But, well, it wasn't anything there either. What we did in Tallinn, and this is, well, we had to provide, this is 15.5 hectares, and we had to provide 264 living units, rather sort of small or medium-sized, 110 square meters. And we had to provide 2 parking places for one living unit. So, and this is quite an extreme case. It's basically this area has grown together with Tallinn. It used to be small fishermen's villages. In the 70s and 80s, this was an area of summer cottages. From there on, it has been private residences, and basically all the fields of the fishermen are now sort of built in. And usually we are not allowed to touch the forests, but as this became so popular, and this is the most expensive place for living, and it generates the sort of biggest tax per inhabitant in Estonia. So they decided that, okay, now we're going to develop the forest as well. And we were involved only when they started sort of designing buildings. And we had a planning. The planning indicated the roads and the parcels. And we were supposed to sort of provide this amount of units in these parcels. And basically, this would have meant that we would have had to cut basically all trees to provide the parking. So our point was that the only way to sort of preserve or kind of have the forest quality there still is if we generate these kind of islands where you drive in and all the cars under the living units. The budget didn't allow to go underground, so we had to stay on ground, and we had a very specific height limit. So the ground level car parks are just 2.1 meters high. But with this very simple move, we achieved something which I think is worthwhile. That we actually could save the trees, and we insisted that they have to be very close to the buildings, that anything which is not the building don't touch. And the builders kind of almost succeeded in that. So, and they, well, now they built one, the other one is on the way, and I think they're going to continue. And this is something we really wanted, and we should more or less got it. So it is in the trees are really very, very close. And well, it's these are quite ugly pictures. But and there's a new courtyard. The whole point of that was that we have a wooden envelope, and the envelope is the same for all the buildings. But each courtyard is very artificial. Each courtyard has a completely different kind of atmosphere, materiality, and the buildings are actually sort of identifiable by the courtyards. So either you have a brick courtyard or this ugly courtyard or something else. And by more or less the same time, we were working with them with an apartment building in Pirita, which is the yachting center for the 1980 Moscow Olympics. It's a big thing, and it's the main yachting port. And it used to have small private villas, and now they're being turned into apartment buildings. Well, which means they're bought and demolished, and something new is there. And this is where we did an apartment building. It was, I think, almost the sort of most dangerous project was, because it's the only time we worked almost to the construction drawings, and we didn't get a building permit, and we didn't get it. And the argument was that this building doesn't suit to the pattern, and we actually had to redesign it, and it was a huge problem with that. And it's a site. It has beautiful trees, quite a lot of them, and our ambition was to hide the building in a way in the shadow of these trees, and we used black brick. It's not the sort of Riga-style real brick. This is the cheap thin thing, and we were restricted. And there were enormous restrictions. At first we said we have to provide 2 buildings because it was too big for that. And then we said, well, we thought it's really very strange to put 2 small buildings there. So we had the parking floor. So basically we rose, we went 1.4 meters, I think, deep with the parking, and rise another 1.4 meters for the living. And then we generated this sort of big hole in the middle where you can actually enter either one of the buildings. And on the top floor, there were 2 very big apartments. And in the meanwhile, there were sort of normal persons' apartments, around sort of 60 or 70 square meters. We decided then, okay, if we do a brick building, we've never done a big brick building before, and then everything is brick. And even the ceiling is kind of dark brick. And we had a very restricted height, and I think it was around 2.6 meters only. So the decision was that all windows have to be as tall as possible. So all windows come to the ground, which means the heating is in the floor. And opposite to the very dark building, everything, when you go inside, everything is very bright light. This is white terrazzo, and then just white walls, and then all openings have this kind of the timber finishings also inside. All right, I think I should go a bit faster. Huh? It's we did 2 buildings, continuing with the brick. This is again a rather sort of expensive area next to Tallinn. For private villas, and then we did another brick building, and this is real bricks. These are real thick bricks, and this is the one. Again, we said that okay, we can do a brick building, but then okay, they'll do everything with bricks. And what we achieved really was we didn't pick the furniture. That basically the ground floor is all bricks, and also the load-bearing walls are from bricks. And this was incredibly difficult to find an engineer who would say that, okay, I'll do the working drawings for brick load-bearing walls, and then to convince the builder that he actually has to lay bricks. And this was something which, as you said, it's lost. Nobody knows how to lay bricks anymore. And for engineering, brick wall is something completely new. All right, and there's another thing we get approached by people when something is wrong already. I mean, there was a couple of 2 friends had bought some old farmlands and decided to generate a small area of 11 housing units. And they obviously had the plan already. So the street pattern and the plots were there. And it's completely flat, this sort of typical Estonian thing, completely flat ground. And it's a very boring setting, so what can we do with it? And the strategy then was that we bombard it with buildings. So we have buildings which have access to the ground on both floors. So we dig in, and well, in principle, we actually sort of put the earth we take from the ground from one place to another place. So you dig in 1.5 meters, a bit less, and then you sort of climb up 1.5 meters in the other side. And we arranged, we worked very economically. We were 5 people in the office at that time, so we did 5 prototypes. and each prototype got used twice and one 3 times. And well, here you see, you generate these kind of little holes and the little hills. And the whole idea was to, it's a bit of a zoo of similar kinds of things, that the materiality is the same always, and the technical detailing is the same. Well, like many things, they built in the end 2, or maybe by now there are 4. Yeah, here you can see the section, and then something happened, and they didn't build anymore. So we have a couple of pictures of what actually happened. All right. And this is a building with a very, it's a very low-cost building. Again, a person had bought an old farm site, which is, I think, and he bought some more land. At this time it was very cheap, the farming land, and he went in a very private setting. And this is, I mean, it is really very, very private. And one of the big qualities of it was it had these long views of fields. And he came with a wish to sort of regenerate the farm. He actually wanted something like that, a very traditional, sort of simple building. And again, we said, yeah, of course, I mean, basically, why not? We can do all sorts of buildings. And then we worked with this roof, and the budget was very low. So, I mean, you really have to use every part of space you generate in a very, very functional way. And then when you work this kind of triangular space, you realize that, I mean, these angles, there's nothing to do there. And we worked very hard with it, and in the end, the client was completely convinced that this is a complete waste of space. And he was very happy to have something like that. It's, yeah, it is. And the view, this is the long view, and this is to the south. South over here is a big thing. I mean, you really have the sun. And there are certain moments where in the summer the sun is maybe too much. So basically with this kind of little cantilever where we have that, you get the winter sun still in the living rooms, but in summer you have the shade, and it's a very, very simple thing, but it surprisingly works very, very well. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the budget didn't allow to put heating in the ground, so we have these big radiators, but we couldn't sort of avoid them. And he insisted on a big stove, and this actually can heat the building. It's right in the center. It's almost a quadrat, and the big stove is right in the center, and it almost does the thing. And this, I mean, I like this picture. This is the sort of facts of life. This is Estonian life, incredibly grey and gloomy most of the time, and yeah, it's the sort of beauty of reality. And this is the last thing. This is a fancy thing we did for a very wealthy client. Again, I mean, this is very close to Tallinn. Well, basically, it is in Tallinn, and it has the views to the old town and the new high-rises. And this is one of the rare places where the sea is not facing north; it's facing west. and even sort of almost getting the south sun, and this is a huge value. Again, it's a typical pattern of these private residences, and the land actually rises. So you have these views, and well, it's basically a house for the views. It's really a one-sided building. Every room has a view, and the view is something like that. It had a very nice building from the 50s, but this was obviously sort of torn down. And we worked, I mean, I think it was the only project we had in the office at that time, so we worked very, I mean, we can't do this anymore, to work so hard with private residences. So we did a lot of research. How do you arrange this stuff? And the blue stuff is kind of the public space of a private residence, the living quarters. And well, in the end, again, we go a little bit down with the cars and a bit up with the living areas. And this is concrete, and the rest is a steel frame, and it is covered with plywood. It's glued plywood. It's the first time we did that in Estonia, that there are no screws or anything, but it is glued. And these are huge pieces of plywood, so the maximum size we could get from that time. And well, one of the ideas was really that when you're in the building, and obviously from here you don't get any views, but from the living areas the views are great already. And when you're in the building, you're almost like in the garden a little bit. So the monolith concrete also has the concrete floor, and the plywood from the outside is also used in the inside. So you have exactly the same materials as in the exterior you have in the interior. Yeah, well, and then when you go up or you go down, then the atmosphere changes. It's a very light atmosphere upstairs, the main sort of sleeping area with a view from the bath and all sorts of sort of sexy things, and the sporting area. We did a bath, a bubble bath, a jacuzzi submerged in the ground, and we insisted that it is covered by exactly the same surface, exactly the same wood, which is on the floor. And this was very difficult. I mean, this came off 5 times, I think, and in the end they managed to do it. It was basically like constructing a yacht, and then it worked. And the very sort of final thing is that the guys said that, okay, it's a nice building, but now we need a guest house. And the guest house, the whole point of the guest house is that it's like a continuation of a fence. We just made the fence 2.5 meters wide, and and the fence original fence was in 2 heights. This was the normal height, and this was 3 meters because there was a tennis court here, so we had to make a little bit higher fence. So the building does the same thing. Here it goes in the ground, and it continues the line of the fence, and this is above ground and continues the line of fence of the tennis court. It's a very kind of simple thing. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Toomas, for the presentation. A lot of trees, a lot of bricks. But any questions, Toomas?
Hello. Thank you very much for bringing your ideas here at Riga. And our special interest is, of course, about these large-scale housing areas, which is our common feature, urban feature. And I found your idea about division of this huge scale in smaller settlements very valuable from different point of view, of course, scale and function and other. But my question is more related to the process, because we have similar situation around our region, but we could feel from Tallinn, especially from Tallinn, that you have quite powerful, I don't know, powerful is the right word, but quite formulated floor to think about these questions. In autumn we participate in this exhibition for another big scale area in Tallinn. And could you give a bit insight about the process of thinking about it? Was it competition, this your participation? And how do you think, what could be future of your proposal?
Thank you. I mean, everything looks much fancier from the outside. From the inside, it's a bit different always. I mean, the whole process was, we have, the Architects Union has a curated exhibition every year. We choose a curator, and then he or she does whatever he or she thinks is important. And this year it was really, well, actually last year, it was really the prefabricated housing areas, and what do we do with this? But it was very clearly only an architect's initiative. And I think it's a huge problem. The politicians obviously don't want to talk about it, but also, I mean, the rest, even the real estate people, I mean, if within the next 50 years, these areas are becoming sort of uninhabitable, so what do we do? I mean, this is 1/3 of the population of Tallinn. It's a huge problem. So the architects now are sort of trying to rise that. But it doesn't, well, it resonates a bit, but not enough, I would say. And I mean, well, how do you implement this? It is very difficult because all these flats are privately owned. Well, one of the things they've had to do is each apartment building has to generate a sort of apartments union, or however you call this. I don't know a better word. Well, some kind of institutional body. And I mean, and then there's one step further. If you put 5 of these together and basically make a local government, why not? And then you sort of start. Then the head of the housing association becomes the mayor, basically. And it's just one little step, but it could generate quite a lot, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, thank you for the answer and for the presentation. Applause to Toomas.
Thank you.